Morning, race fans. Hey, David, how's it going? Morning, David. Punch that in there in case you're not quite listening, tuning in yet. Set up the camera here. Just sharing the link and wait for a few more people to come in. Going to dig into this Daytona 500. Happy race day, everyone. It's finally here. We've had some interesting racing in terms of the clash with tons of wrecks there, and then it was a little bit different in terms of the duels on Ryan Blaney's going to have to go to the back. He does keep his starting position, so he should be a little bit lower owned. One driver I'll touch on there right off the bat just because he's going to the back, but he still has that starting position of 27. So, I mean, even with all the I think there was about 5 cars that went to the back, a lot of them lower end cars. So that's just going to in turn push Blaney even up further, even closer to his actual starting position from the start of the race. So I'm not actually concerned at all. Morning, Steven. Stacking the back of FanDuel less optimal? No, not at all. Place differential here, even though it is FanDuel, it's a little less important. But still, if you start looking at some of the optimal lineups, you see guys starting from the back. Because, I mean, you get a guy that starts 10th, finishes 8th, versus a driver who starts maybe 20th and finishes 12th. That driver is obviously going to have more points, especially, I mean, when we're talking 30th and outside the back of the pack, 30th to 40th. They don't need to finish top 10. They can. The upside's definitely there. This race is almost open to anyone to finish top 10 and almost anyone to win the race. So that's definitely an optimal strategy. What I'm really looking at from a strategy standpoint today is only no more than one driver from the top 10 if I have any in my lineup builds. And then usually I want to have 3 or 4 is my target from about 25th back, and 2 from 30th back. And then kind of that mid range is where I really like GPPs to kind of differentiate yourself. I think you're going to have a lot of people with full 20th and back lineup builds. So I think maybe dipping into if you're going to dip into big time into like the 10th to 15th, 10th to 18th starting positions, I think it's best to leave the top 10 out of those lineup builds, and go maybe 4 drivers from 10th to 18th, 10th to 20th if you want to be a little bit contrarian, and then maybe like your other 2 to 3 drivers outside the top 30, outside the top 20, top 30, and further back. And then the GPP plays I got on there in blue, I really like exposure to, but they're starting kind of in that non-optimal starting position range, I guess you could say. Okay, I'm just going to share a couple articles here. Also let you know that I'm here for, well, 3 different sites actually. The live show on Sunday, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about both before we really get in, waiting for a few more people to show up here. So first of all, I'm working for DFSR.com. I do a preview article there every week. It was out on Thursday, I believe. So I kind of go over the race. I'm changing it up a little bit this year. Last year, I did a lot of looking at track history, track type history. I'm going more this year into a bigger preview, like my PGA article, looking at the track type, the optimal lineups from years past, and what kind of strategy works, what kind of strategy we're going to use that week, as well as just some general thoughts on the race and the track itself. And then I'm digging in. The article is coming out post qualifying most weeks, depending on how the race weekend lines up. But for the most part, it will be post qualifying picks, so it's a little bit more accurate. That last year, I mean, I got a few sites. Daily Overlay is one of the sites that actually tracks our picks across all sports, and they do, there's about 20 or 25 different tout sites out there that they track. And I ended up winning the NASCAR one last year. So I'm really trying to follow that up. So that's another reason why I want to make my picks post qualifying. Not so much post practice, just because some weekends we're not going to have time for that, but post qualifying for sure, because that is huge, especially on DraftKings in terms of place differential and stuff. Okay, I'm going to go over a couple questions here before I share a few things. Past winning DraftKings Daytona lineups. The only thing, like after today's race, I'm definitely going to go ahead and start saving screenshotting a few of the winning lineups just so that I can reference them. That maybe the Daytona race in the summer or Daytona next year. I never did that in the past. I really wish I would have to analyze that stuff. I'm sure there is a place you can find it, but what I'm using just to kind of analyze optimal lineups. So one thing I noticed looking at the optimal lineups for Daytona the last 6 races was there wasn't any more than one driver starting top 10. And then on top of that, we found that it was about 25th and back where the majority of the cars came from. There was an outlier race, and I believe it was Ryan Blaney. He led 114 laps. I'm just going to pull that up here real quick just to get you some perspective on that. Yeah, okay. So it was the 2018 Daytona 500. Austin Dillon ended up winning that race. Blaney started 7th, led 118 laps, totally crushed for fantasy purposes. But that's kind of an outlier. We don't really see that. There was a few. I think there was 4 drivers that started top 10 that finished top 10 in that race. That was very, that was one of the outlier races when breaking things down. So before we get going here, the other site that I work for is rotopros.com. So I just want to share you a couple articles there. Dane Chanot is jumped on board with us for the PGA and NASCAR season. Absolutely been crushing it for us. Here is his season preview article, as well as his Daytona 500 article with his post-qualifying picks. And a membership to either DFSR or to RotoPros gets you into our members-only chat. Once you're in there, that's where you're going to be able to find my DFS NASCAR cheat sheet, where I've got all the data loaded on there: practice, qualifying, track history, track type history, my favorite GPP, cash game, value plays are on there as well, and a bunch of other information coming down the line as well. So in RotoPros, you can jump into the Slack chat. You'll be able to grab that in there in the daily content channel. For DFSR, you're going to want to go up to the top navigation bar, go to Other Sports, and click Chris's DFS Sheets. Members will be able to get in there and download my sheet there. So I'm also going to just throw out my article for DFSR as well that I had talked about while I'm waiting for that internet page to load, which is very slow today. You can also get my DFS sheets and into my chat over at my Patreon, which I started, I believe it was like January 2nd or something like that. Here's my article for DFSR. Yeah, so I've got a Patreon page, so it's www.patreon.com/ I'm just going to share the link with you because I will definitely be getting it wrong. / Jagerbombs actually kept it pretty easy. So I'm going to paste that in here too, and then I'm going to start answering some more questions here. Have to pay the bills, have to get all that out there first. So definitely join up. RotoPros, DFSR, or my Patreon if you're just looking for sheets, all available for you. How much cash to leave on the table? Okay, that's a great question. I don't actually go in saying, okay, I'm going to leave $500 to $1,000 off the table on this lineup build, because I'm doing about 30 lineups today on DraftKings, about 5 to 10 on FanDuel, just because of time restraints for me. But on DraftKings, I'm not going in with the thought that I'm going to leave salary on the table. I'm just going to go in. I'm going to build a lineup that I absolutely like or love. I'm going to put that in, and when I'm done and I look at it, if there's $2,500 left over, not concerned. If there's $1,000, not concerned. If there's $4,000, I'm actually not concerned at the Daytona 500. If you wanted to go, we have seen in the past, wacky things happen. Rain, there's 30% chance of rain in the forecast anyway. If something like that was to come up, we've seen races where you get all the low end sub 6K guys, 4 or 5 of them in the optimal lineup. So building a lineup around my core plays that are starting outside the top 20, outside the top 30, and then I'm going to narrow it down even further. And then, like I said, the guys from 10th to 20th, I'm not taking a bunch into my player pool, maybe 3 or 4 drivers in my player pool from that range, and then maybe only 2 or 3 or 4 from the top 10 range. And most are going to come from the 5th to 10th. I'm not really looking at the poll. The poll hasn't won here. The poll actually hasn't finished, I believe, in the top 10. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to pull it up here in time. The poll, it's been a long time since the poll winner has won here, even, finished top 5, top 10. Lock of the day, there is no lock of the day. This is Daytona. Anything can happen. There could be 5 cars left at the end of the race. There could be 6 crashes. The variance at this race, especially NASCAR variance alone, is huge, but the NASCAR variance at Daytona 500 especially, and then any Daytona or Talladega race, the super speedways, the variance is crazy. So this definitely isn't a race where I'm just going to build one single entry lineup and roll with it and feel very confident about it. I don't actually feel too confident about any of my lineups because there could be a wreck on lap 1 that takes out half your drivers. So I don't really have a lock. I do have some favorites. I'm going to talk about them here in just a second. Who do I think will win? My pick to win is either going to be Denny Hamlin or Kyle Busch. I think Toyota, despite not having as many cars as the Chevy and the Ford, wrong here. Two of the last 6 Daytona 500s. Kyle hasn't really liked the super speedways, but he finished second to Denny Hamlin last year. He's got all the motivation in the world. We know that Kyle Busch is all about checking boxes on all the big races. So he's won 2 championships. He's won at every single track in NASCAR except for the Roval since it came out. He's won at Daytona in the summertime. He's never won the big race, the Daytona 500. So I just see that as motivation for him. And with a teammate like Denny Hamlin, who he can work together with, they're both starting 21st and 28th, so they're not that far off of each other. I think they'll be working together nice and early in this race. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll up. Think of Kevin Harvick. Okay, so I got Kevin Harvick. The model has him down. He hasn't been great here at Daytona. He only has 1 top 20 in the last 4 races at Daytona. Things have not gone well here. He has won the Daytona 500 before, so he's definitely got that. He's got the Ford camp behind him. As we've seen in the duels, Matt DiBenedetto in the 21 for Wood Brothers really pushed really well. Harvick was the one that was working with him there. So I'm kind of looking at for my stacks. If I'm going to be going Ford, I definitely want DiBenedetto in there. He's cheap. For some reason, I didn't have him on my list here. He's starting 25th, so he's definitely going to be core. Not sure why he's not highlighted, but yeah, I'm going to want DiBenedetto on there for sure. That 21 car's definitely got speed. It's won a Daytona 500 before. DiBenedetto's been good. He's got 2 top 10s in his last 4 Daytona 500s in lesser car. So I think he's going to be working well with the Fords today. Another one I'll pair him with is Clint Bowyer. So you get that Bowyer Harvick in there. Bowyer is starting back again. He's not been very good here either. So this could be a little bit of a contrarian. A lot of people looking at track history. You could get a Bowyer and Harvick, which is going to save you a bunch of cash off of, say, like Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin, who's probably going to be your chalk stack just because they're both starting outside the top 20. So pivoting to like Harvick and Bowyer, you get Bowyer starting 29th. You get Harvick, he's starting 10th, so that's going to add a little bit of separation there for you in terms of ownership as well. And then you throw in Matt DiBenedetto as well. I think you've got a solid core there as well if you're looking at the Ford camps. Now, if you're also looking at stacking today, you're going to want to take a look at manufacturer as well as team. So to the left of every driver, I've got manufacturer, Ford, Toyota, Chevy. If you go to the bottom where all the tabs are on the bottom of the cheat sheet, you can also find the entry list tab. I've got all the teams sorted alphabetically by team name. So, of course, you got Beard Motorsports, which is Brendan Gaughan, Ganassi Racing, Busch and Larson. Then you've got like Hendrick has got Elliott, Byron, Johnson, Bowman, Joe Gibbs, Hamlin, Busch, Truex, Jones. So you can go look at that if you're trying to do that. Oh, thanks, Kenny. That's swell. Really appreciate that. I love doing these videos. I kind of started out with the hopes of maybe getting 5 to 10 viewers, and people just kept logging on asking questions. So I'm going to keep doing this every single week of the year. Eventually, my plan is to get this split screen so I can have Dane on with me, or even Kenny. Kenny's been crushing NASCAR so far this year. I believe he didn't start playing until last year, playing a little bit, and now you're absolutely crushing NASCAR. The truck race Friday night, I know you did really well. I know you made a profit again last night. So let's go do it again today, Kenny. Let's get it. Thoughts on LaJoy? Okay. Back to the picks. So yeah, I got LaJoy highlighted. He's 10th in my model. He's got a top 10, 2 top 20s in his last 4 races here. Average finish of 23.8, which is pretty good from a low end driver. And he's starting 36. So he didn't show a bunch of speed in practice. I'm not looking terribly at practice. As you can see, I have 0 weight on practice times. I do like it as a reference just to see how fast their actual car is. And he was 36th and 32nd and 20th in P1. So 20th, 36th, 32nd in practice. Not showing a ton of speed, but again, he started in 36th. If he stays out of a wreck at 5,500, 4,000 on FanDuel, he makes a good value play. The problem for me is he's the same price range as Ty Dillon, who has a top 5, 3 top. Oh, sorry. I'm just going to scroll over here and look at this again. Yeah, he's got a top 5, 3 top 10s in his last 4 races at Daytona, a 13.8 average finish, averaging over 40 DraftKings points per race, and he's only $200 more. So Ty Dillon's definitely going to be the chalk in this range. LaJoy makes a nice pivot. So does Priest. So does McDowell. McDowell's probably my favorite after Ty Dillon. He's got a top 5, 2 top 10s, 3 top 20s here, and averaging actually 44.3 DraftKings, 50.6 FanDuel points per race at Daytona in his last 4 races. He is starting 26th. So he's still in that range for me. 20th to 25th, 25th to 30th, 25th to 30th, obviously my favorite range. Outside top 30 is good as well, but definitely not anyone starting outside the top 20 is definitely in play for me. But in terms of that low end range, goes Ty Dillon, McDowell, and then probably Priest over LaJoy, just because of, again, the slight discount. And then my model also likes him better, so trust the process, I guess you could say. And then Corey LaJoy would be fourth out of those two. And then if you want to go down even lower, Justin Haley's number 2 in my model. Very small sample size there, which puts him at number 2 in my overall model, just because he's only had one race at Daytona. Turns out he won that race last summer. Got 79.8 DK, 72 FanDuel points because he started near the back there in that race. He showed, let's look at the practice times. Yeah, not much for practice, 40th, 28th, 28th. So he did get better from practice 1 moving on. But again, a little bit bigger gap in discount from those guys that we just talked about, McDowell, Dillon, LaJoy, and Priest. And then if you really want to go down and punt on DraftKings, Reed Sorensen is starting dead last. So he only has positive place differential upside. Can't lose place differential upside. He's only 2K on FanDuel, 4,500 on DraftKings. This will be his first race here. He hasn't raced here in the last 2 years at Daytona, but he does have 14 career races at pretty much minimum price. He's 22nd in my model, so that just kind of goes to show you how much I like the place differential upside this week. And something I added this week, if you are looking at the sheet and wondering what the hell the qualifying INV is beside qualifying, for super speedway tracks, I wanted to find a way to weigh place differential a little bit more. So all I did was invert the starting position. So first is 40th, 40th is first, and so on, just so that I can put a weight to that. And as you can see, I've got a 40% weight to that qualifying inverse. So place differential is king here. Place differential is king. Place differential is king. That's all I can say. I mean, if someone was to show me a lineup and everyone was starting outside the top 20th, I don't care who the drivers are. I'm going to tell you that I like the lineup. To be honest with you, that's just a this week thing. Super speedways, like I said, I just want to repeat that this is a totally different animal than going into your intermediate tracks next week, going into your short tracks, going into your road courses. Even this super speedways are a whole other animal. And the Daytona 500 is a completely different animal as well. It's the biggest race. It's like the Super Bowl. If the NFL had the Super Bowl first week of the season. Seems a little crazy, but NASCAR has always been that way, and get super excited for this opening weekend. Just kind of sets the pace. A lot of drivers will even say that the real season doesn't start until week 2. Used to be when they go to Atlanta. Now it's Las Vegas. They've changed the schedule. If you want to see that schedule, make sure to check out Dane's article. In the preview article, he talks about all driver crew chief changes. He talks about rules changes. He talks about the track scheduling changes. So awesome article if you're looking into that stuff for the entire season. Mike asks, how about the rookies? Okay, so I'm just going to go look at their starting positions here. We've got Custer, Bell starting 17th and 12th. Yeah, not really a fan of that. Probably Bell over Custer. I'm actually going to pull up some data here from the Xfinity series and just have a look at these guys. Look at the last 10 races on restrictor plate tracks. And that site that I'm looking at right now, can't screen share, of course, it's kind of a pain in the butt, is racingreference.info. Racingreference.info. Click on the fantasy button in the top right-hand corner, and you can kind of break things down that way as well. You can also go track by track, season by season. You can look at all the data that way as well. It's a really good site. So I'm going to bring up Bell first, and then we'll bring up Custer and Reddick. A little great for TV silence here. So Bell's last 4 races at Daytona in the Xfinity Series over the last 2 years, he's gone. 4. That includes this year's Xfinity race yesterday. So he went third. He's got third in 3 of the last 4 Xfinity races at Daytona. 6th. Don't mind him starting 17th. Probably going to be a little bit lower owned. I'm actually going to add him as a GPP play right now, just because I would prefer going down to say like a Ty Dillon starting 36th, or sorry, 24th, Corey LaJoy starting 36th, Michael McDowell. You get more place differential upside for not much of or like for $1,000 discount. So the points per dollar upside is a lot higher. But Bell starting 17th. He's had success. at Daytona as well. So I'm definitely looking at that. Custer, the only problem with some of these rookies is that they haven't ran with these Cup guys in terms of working together as a team, communications, drafting, that sort of thing, kind of the team game plan. They maybe not be as on board as, say, like Bell. We're looking at he's going to be in that car, which is an alliance with JGR. So you're looking at Truex, Kyle, Hamlin, and Jones. He hasn't really worked with them a whole bunch before, so I take that a little bit into account. But still comes down to place differential. Custer hasn't been great at Daytona. He's more of an intermediate track driver. His last four races were 26th, 32nd, 14th, and 25th. He did have a top 10 in 2018 in the summer race for Xfinity, but then it was 14th, 22nd, 26th, 37 before that. Probably going to end up fading Custer, especially him starting 12th. Not interested. Tyler Reddick has raced Daytona in the Cup Series before. He finished 27th, so not too bad there. He is starting 22nd, so realistically, all three are going to be GPP plays for me, and I'm going to rank them Bell, Reddick, and Custer, just because Custer hasn't had first of all, he's starting 12th, which is the furthest ahead of the three rookies, and then he is also not had the experience, hasn't been as good at Daytona as the other two. You kind of have a look. So I figured someone would be asking that. So what I'm looking at is the 3 max contest. So you've got your, I wish I could break this down by 3 max, 20 max, $3 3 max, and then there's a $3 20 max. Those are two of my favorite contests. I love the $4 single entry, the $5 single entry, the $12 single entry. If you're going a little bit cheaper, you got the NASCAR happy hour, and this is all on DraftKings I'm talking right now. That's a $1 20 max. So I'm definitely looking at that one. If you want to go a little bit higher, maybe into the 150 maxes, you can get up into the $33 150 max, or it's 105 max, sorry, in that one. It's getting close to full. There's the $10 150 max that's got 104,000 entries in that one. That's 150 max. That's 150K to first. I don't suggest going in those 150 max tournaments unless you're maxing it out. If you're maxing it out, great. If you're not, the problem with doing that is if you go and run 5 lineups when you've got 300 other people running 150, they've probably taken your core that you have in your 5 lineups and duplicated that 10, 20 times, just going different ways. So you're well behind everyone else in the contest before it even starts. So keep that in mind if you're going in the 150 max contests. I love the 3 max, 20 max single entries. That's what I'm going in on DraftKings. In terms of FanDuel, the contest selection isn't as good. Like they've got their Super Intimidator, which is $5.55. That's 150 max, 25K to first. It's tough because, again, it's 150 max contest unless you have that time to put that in. They do have a lot of single entries, anywhere from $1 up to $10 up to $300, $100 single entries. There's some 3 maxes in terms of $5 entries. The one that I really liked was the NASCAR restrictor plate. It's a 3 entry max. It was $15, so $45. It was only like 250 people, so first pays out about 600. Very balanced payouts there. Very few in the contest and 3 entries, so it's only $45. So I kind of go in those rather than putting that $45 into that Intimidator. It does pay out 25K, but if I take those 3 to 5 lineups and put them in that 150K, I'm going to get blown away unless I get super, super, super lucky. I mean, we're going to need to get lucky anyway, so you might as well set yourself up to be the most successful with the lineups you have. Don't put them in the 150 max if you're not maxing it out. I mean, you can be successful. I'm not saying it can't work, but the odds of it working go down. Love Brendan Gaughan. This is his last season. He declared that. He's been really good on the super speedways. That's pretty much the only races he's ran over the last few years. He's got 2 top 20s in the last 4 races. So, I mean, he doesn't stand out. He's not a guy I'm looking at to win the race by any means, but for fantasy, he's been excellent. The last 4 races, he's averaged over 30 DraftKings, over 40 FanDuel points. He's starting 39, so pretty much dead last. I think I would rather go lock in every lineup, but he's definitely a play for me on FanDuel, only 2,500, starting 39th. That's, you could pair him and Sorensen together and get anybody else you wanted and still leaving a ton of money on the table. So that's definitely the way I'm looking at Gaughan today. Definitely a part of my core plays, especially on FanDuel. See if I missed any questions here. Thanks, Bully. Really appreciate that. Thanks for tuning in. Andy, do you think Justin Haley will be over-owned due to the previous win? I think that will have a lot to do with it in terms of ownership in that lower. You're looking at that lower tier sub 6K range on DraftKings. People see that he's raced once at Daytona and he won. Yeah, I think they're going to jump on board. So for me, I like going to Ty Dillon. I think Haley, because he's cheaper, he's got that win, is going to possibly be lower owned. He's starting 33rd here as well. Corey LaJoie started in 36th, Ty Dillon 24th, and Michael McDowell 26th. So I'm willing to take the risk and go with McDowell Dillon starting ahead, 5-6 spots, 10 spots, to maybe avoid that ownership with Haley, being that I don't think he's going to win again. Being a high variance race, some people never win at Daytona, and he's already won in one race. So I do think that's going to affect the ownership a little bit. Maybe not a whole bunch, but I would see from a regular Daytona race, say he didn't have that win, I think he would be probably 5 to 10% less owned today in GPP if he didn't have that win. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at that. Talked about LaJoie. I'm just scrolling through the questions here. If you got any more, fire them off. I'm going to be about another 5-10 minutes here, and I'm going to take off. I'm going to finish building my lineups, as well as taking the kid to curling today. The women's curling championships in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan this afternoon. So we're going to head up and take her to that. I will be watching Daytona 500 either on my phone, on my computer. Maybe they'll have it on the big screen. I highly doubt that, but you never know. Guy can dream, can he? All right. So thinking of fading top 20. Yeah, fading the top 20 could work. I mean, looking at the optimal lineups, we definitely have seen guys in that 10th to 20th spot. That's something else I wanted to touch on. There have been drivers who have led 40-plus laps here at Daytona. The problem is a lot of them didn't finish. Like, let's go to the summer race last year. Joey Logano started 21st, or started first, finished 25th, led 40 laps, and only got 6 DK points. So those laps led meant absolutely nothing. Austin Dillon started 21st, finished 33rd, led race high 46 laps, meant absolutely nothing. He finished with 11.5 points. Starting to see a trend here. The last year's Daytona 500, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch both led 30 plus. Kyle started 31st, finished second. Denny Hamlin won it. Hamlin won it starting from the 10th position. They finished high up in the fantasy points, obviously. That was just a bonus for them. But in the same race, William Byron started first, finished 21st, led 44 laps. Again, 16.5 DK points. Not going to work. Matt DiBenedetto started 9th, finished 28th, led 49 laps, race high. Only got 13 fantasy points. So there's just not enough dominator points there to make up for losing place differential, if that makes sense at all. So keep that in mind. Yeah, my daughter isn't curling, unfortunately. She's actually headed not this weekend, but next weekend to her regional championship. She won districts last week, so this is just going to watch the national Canadian women's Scotties Tournament of Hearts. So it was definitely a Christmas present for her because she's big into curling and golf. So NASCAR as well, but of course we don't really have a bunch of tracks up here where kids can. You have to define way back there, Reggie, because I've kind of talked about my core. I'm not doing any more than one inside the top 10. I like maybe maybe one driver from the 10th to 15th, 2 to 3 from the 15th to 20th. And I know these numbers aren't going to match up, but this is kind of the exposure level that I'm looking at for each price range. 20th to 30th, I'm probably looking at, even let's just say 25th all the way to the back, I'm looking at probably 4 drivers from that range in the cores of my lineups. So if I'm doing 20 in about 10 of those lineups, I'm going to have 4 from 25th and back, probably going to have 2 from that 15th to 20th, somewhere in there, 25th and back. Okay, so most of my lineups, I'd say 60 to 70% of all my lineups today will have probably 4 drivers from the 25th and back. There will be some spots where I only have 3 because I do like to be a little bit contrarian. I am going to target that 12th to 20th, 12th to 25th, somewhere in that mid-range, because I think if you go with 2 to 3 guys in that mid-range, I think you can separate yourself a little bit. I mean, it may not work out because all the guys from the back may come forward and get all those place differential points and blow away in terms of DraftKings scoring. So It's not a given that it's going to work, but it's all about setting yourself up if something does happen. You got to think of your lineup construction that way, not just picking and choosing guys and saying, yeah, I like those guys. What I like to do is position myself with a core of drivers. So 5 lineups I'm going to build with 3 or 4 guys from 15th to 25th. The other 2 will come from outside of 25th. And then other lineups, I'm going to go 4 or 5 drivers from 25th and back, and maybe 1 from the top 10, maybe 1 from the top 10, 1 from 10th to 15th kind of thing. And I'm going to build 5 lineups like that, so that if that ends up working that way and that's the way the race ends up panning out, I'm going to take advantage of that because I've got 5 lineups built that way, all with a few different drivers mixed and matched in there. But generally, I'm going to pick a core of 3 or 4. I'm going to build 5 to 10 lineups around that 3 or 4. So if that core ends up finishing the race, which is key, maybe even forward, I'm going to take advantage of that and have a good shot at taking down a GPP because I've got multiple lineups built. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Jason is asking about Truex. I am not high on Truex. Probably end up with none. Just because I'm going to have so much Kyle Busch, Elliott, and Hamlin because of the place differential. I talked about Kevin Harvick and Kevin Harvick and Clint Boyer. I talked about Ryan Blaney. I really like him as a GPP play. He's going to the rear, but he's starting 27th. He gets pushed forward because some of the other cars that went to the back there as well. So Truex I'm not built. If I was building 150, I would definitely have some exposure in that Toyota camp. But starting 15th, he's one of the drivers I'm probably not going to have any exposure to just because I'm only doing 20 to 30. I've already got my player pool out. But if you're doing more than that, or I don't think he's a bad play, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying he's a bad play starting 15th, but I'm looking another direction. Like I said, I'm doing about 20 to 30 lineups on DraftKings. He won't be in my player pool. But if I was doing, say, 50 or more lineups, I would definitely expand that player pool and include Truex at 15th because he kind of falls into that mid-range contrarian starting position that I'm looking at. All right, I think that almost wrapped it up. I think I answered everyone's question. If I didn't somehow answer your question, you can leave a comment in the video below. Hit me up at Rotor Pros in the Slack chat. Hit me up DFSR in our members chat there. You can hit me up with a message if you're a patron member. Hit me up with a message from patron or in that Slack chat or on Twitter at Jaeger_bombs9. Okay, got one more question here. What's the best value today? There's a lot of values, to be honest. My favorite is Ty Dillon. He's number 1 in my model, starting 24th. He's had success here. But like I talked about, if you check the sheet out, there is values all the way in the sub 6K range. There's actually 6 that I've highlighted that I like today. So definitely check that out. Thanks, everyone, for joining me. Like I said, check all those other places out if you've got questions leading up to Lineup Lock. Lineup Lock is 2:30 p.m. Eastern, so that gives us 3.5 hours, a little over 3.5 hours here to go and build some lineups. I'm around right up until then, making the wife drive. I hope she can't hear me right now. Making her drive so I can build my lineups on the way up to the city, and we'll go from there. Let's get some green screens, see that checkered flag, and good luck out there, everyone. Oh, Jason, sorry. Where do I find your ideas? Okay, so my cheat sheet is available, like I said, over at rotorpros.com. You can sign up for a free trial. Come in and check out what we're all about there. It's posted in the chat there. DFSR.com. You can get a free trial by signing up to that site. Go to the Chris's sheet page. You'll find it there or in the chat. And you can also find it on my Patreon page. That's www.patreon.com/Jagerbombs. Either 3 of those places you can get my cheat sheet. It's got all my highlighted core, GPP, and value plays on there, as well as any of those chats and on Twitter if you've got questions. Thanks a lot, everyone. Talk to you later. Let's get some green screens.